Welcome to the Meet the Entrepreneur podcast. This is Arteen Zahiri, and I am the co-host of this feature along with Ramir Keshwani. Today, we are sitting down with Kumar, founder and chief of R&D, and Carl Nielson, managing director of CITYDATA.ai. As a GovTech 100 company, CITYDATA builds and maintains daily refreshed, anonymized knowledge graphs about people presence, activity, and movement for thousands of cities on a global scale. The company's geospatial AI platform provides fresh, accurate, anonymized, and actionable insights about how people interact with the real world.
For our audience, it would be really helpful if you can kind of explain in your words what is CITYDATA.ai and what's the mission behind it.
Yeah, so CITYDATA.ai is a GovTech company, and we're solely focused on answering the question, how many people? And what that is our mission is to compute daily tasks and impacts across trends of about 1 billion plus people and across 5,000 cities across the globe. So our vision for the platform and for our dashboard and to provide a citizen engagement opportunity through some of our apps and to kind of update the outdated ways that cities and governments look at data and understand what's going on within their cities. So for example, what does that mean? So for example, let's take the city of Palo Alto, or how many people are in Golden Gate Park. We're able to show as people are moving through those areas, or what neighborhoods do they come through, how many people are hiking on particular trails in the area, and even with COVID and the pandemic and kind of changing the movement patterns of people moving different areas, is how many people have relocated from the cities to the suburbs during and after the pandemic, and then now even with recovery, some of the commercial zones, trying to understand how businesses have been impacted and where people are going due to other businesses being closed. So we use our data from a crowdsourcing standpoint, and we combine the data through our data sets, IoT sensors, and we're able to infer the presence, density, and people movement, again, across the globe. It's a live platform that our customers subscribe to, and we basically sell the data and insights to local governments, the cities, municipalities, nonprofit research companies, and other enterprise businesses.
So, Carl, I would love to hear more about like you said, you just touched on like crowdsourcing your data through sensors, and like, do you guys have integrations with probably like other apps or companies that are also collecting data that would be useful?
Yeah, absolutely. So we crowdsource data at massive scale, and we do this worldwide. And this is done in a variety of different ways using many different techniques. For example, like you just mentioned, we might partner with mobile app developers or mobile publishers, and we might request them to share data with us with full opt-in and consent from the end users, and in a privacy compliant way, and completely anonymized, so that we can basically understand how many people. So we are, at the end of the day, like Carl mentioned, we are looking for a count. We don't really care who the people are, we just need a count. And so if we can get our hands on anonymized crowdsourced data sets, that's a really good source for trying to infer how many people. Now, in addition to that, we might partner with let's say Wi-Fi or hotspot providers, service providers. Many cities now have Wi-Fi hotspots in their downtowns, and these are free open hotspots that people can connect to. And so there's this drive to increase broadband connectivity and wireless connectivity throughout the country. Lots of downtown areas, commercial zones, trade areas are going to have more Wi-Fi going forward. If we can get a sense for how many people are connecting to those Wi-Fi locations, that's a great way to know how many people. Along the same lines, Many of the commercial districts and shopping malls tend to have people counters or Bluetooth beacons that essentially count people as they come in the door or exit. And those beacon networks are a great source of crowdsourced data for us. And last but not the least, we also work with cities, with municipalities. So oftentimes when we work with the local government, they have their own initiatives. They are working to deploy these IoT sensor grids. And these could be people counting sensors. These could be smart parking meters. These could be lighting points, solar lighting points, electric vehicle charging stations. Each of these devices is essentially producing a count in some way or form, like how many people were in the proximity of that parking meter, or how many cars were parked there, or how many people connected to the to the electric vehicle charging station. So we try and collect those counts directly from the city's data sources. And so the combination of all of these different data sources helps us to build models, which essentially helps us to answer the question, how many people?
Excellent. Very, very insightful. And you're mentioning your only concerns with the count, and you mentioned the data being anonymized. I'd be curious to hear, however, there's obviously been lots of concerns over data privacy and citizens and individuals just not wanting to feel tracked. How do you guys handle the overall concerns of society with surveillance, so-called surveillance technology, and those kinds of fears?
That's a great question, and that is our number one concern as well. So as a GovTech company, our main job is to protect consumer data and respect privacy. We are not going to win any deals if we don't build that reputation. So to that end, we've invested an enormous amount of time and resources to research and study the overall privacy landscape, regulations, cultural expectations in different countries and regions around the world. So for example, in the US now, especially starting with California, we have the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, which was really modeled after the European GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. But there are also other pockets around the world, like Singapore and Southeast Asia. They have this thing called the Personal Data Protection Act, or the PDPA, and they're derivatives of that. And Brazil and LATAM are now creating their own LGPD, which is their own privacy regulation. So as we operate in all of these countries and regions, we've had to be very strict and very disciplined about how we go about collecting data and producing these insights. So the first thing is we completely reject personal data. When we collect data firsthand, we are in control, and so we can ensure that there is no personal data flowing into our cloud. But if we are collecting data from third parties or from municipal sources or open data sets, we've got to be very, very careful about no personal data ever making it into our cloud. So we have checks in place to make sure that never happens. The second thing we do is we try to hash everything we have. So one, there is no personal data entering the cloud, but whatever data does enter the cloud, we've got to hash it. And that is one powerful way of anonymizing it. The third way of anonymizing it is to just obfuscate it. So for example, if we receive a data point from a mobile device and it indicates that this device was at this latitude and longitude at this time, that might be a data point that might not comply with GDPR, for example. So one of the ways you obfuscate that is you shift the place and time. So you are not going to have the exact locations of these people. And at the same time, you aggregate this on a grid. A grid might be a 100 meter by 100 meter square grid. And so you really don't have individual data points anymore. You have aggregated, anonymized, hashed, time-shifted, space-shifted data points. So all of these things are necessary, because without this, you really can't build a truly privacy-compliant pipeline. And I know there are companies in this space that may or may not do all of these, but the way we look at privacy, you've got to do all of these things if you want to thrive in the government space.
I think that's really interesting. It makes sense, right? For a company that's global, you guys obviously need to be compliant with international data protection laws. I just have a quick follow-up. Like, does the data you collect vary based on the country that you guys are operating in, or based on the specific municipality that you guys have kind of partnered with?
Could you say that one more time?
Does the data that you guys that CityData collects, is it different based on the location of the city that you guys are kind of working with at the time? Like like you said, like working with Singapore versus working with like Austin, Texas, you know?
Right. So the data does vary based on the available data sources. So what we've done is we've built our privacy fabric, if you will, so that it is globally compliant. So we don't have to worry about the variations in local privacy regulation anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So there are still variations in the data sets that are collected in each city or in each state, but those variations in data sets are primarily because of what's available in that region or in that city. San Francisco, for example, might be willing to open up not only their parks and programs and events and activities, but also their 311 customer service data set. So we come in with our core mobility data sets, our census demographics data sets. The city opens up additional data sets, and the combination is very powerful. But in some other countries or in other cities, we might not be able to get access to some of these city-owned data sets as freely or as openly as we do in the US. So it varies based on what's available in each country and each region, and our platform adapts to that.
Got it. So the main source of difference is just in terms of like how the data is collected and what's collected. The regulation doesn't have that big of an impact on the variation in the data sets across the different countries and cities you guys operate in.
That's exactly right. So crime data is a great example there, just to build on that. In the US, there are many cities that openly publish their crime data sets. So you can get a sense for how many incidents have happened in your neighborhood, in your city, within 1 square mile around where you live or where you work, which are great data points to have because you want to know if there are burglaries or there are incidents that concern you where you are. But there are other countries and jurisdictions where such data sets are very, very hard to get. They are held very closely. So I really appreciate the level of openness we have with data here in the US and in some Western countries, but our platform has to adapt to these different levels of availability when it comes to data.
I know that you two have a lot of, I'd say, like diverse experience working in tech companies. We were speaking with Carl before, and he's a serial founder, and obviously you guys have a lot of experience coming in. In terms of like bringing your expertise and your knowledge to the government sector, essentially to the public sector, how does that feel? Like, how is working with governments directly in this way like different from working in another industry or working in something that's solely private?
And just to add on to that question, I feel like there's kind of this conventional narrative that bureaucracy and governments are kind of naturally opposed to technology, not very tech savvy. I think it's obvious that this kind of data and analytics could really be impactful in the way that we make decisions at the government level. But I'd be curious to hear so far what's been your experience working with governments and what's the reception around using this kind of technology in their space.
So a lot of our team actually does have the kind of tech company background, which is very helpful for all facets of our business. The kind of the tech background is go and get things done quickly and at no cost, and a lot of fundraising involved, where government incredibly slow, very cautious. It's maintain the status quo across the board. Specifically, a lot more in the U.S. that we're finding, the slower kind of minutia there, and in other parts of the world and regions like the Middle East, for example, their prime smart city governments that are very advanced because they've built their cities from scratch. A lot of the new developments over there. So it's interesting to see the range of clients that we work with. But definitely here in the U.S., it's a lot more kind of a consultative approach, educating them, and really kind of helping them understand how to use the data. And we learn a lot from our government clients here as well. So if we encounter a lot of issues with them being able to use the data or analyze the data, then we'll build them a custom dashboard or something that's a little bit easier for them to digest or even share internally across other stakeholders as well. But there are other cities like San Jose, for example. I say is definitely a city that's a little bit more advanced. They're recognized as one of Bloomberg's smart cities that they've been accredited with, and they're kind of making a government and technology job desirable for people coming right out of school, which you really wouldn't think like that. Especially in Silicon Valley, where there's plenty of tech companies, but they're definitely trying to shift and change their culture internally, and done a really, really good job of doing that. And they're even open to sharing their blueprint with other cities that a little bit more slow to evolve and advance. But the pandemic has definitely created a ton of opportunity, and we kind of saw that vision early. With the shift between technology and governments, and the pandemic has definitely accelerated that. So it's, they've had to adapt quickly for remote working and cybersecurity and all those issues. But now it's focusing on, okay, how do we scale this from technology and innovation? So, again, for our standpoint, our background really is tremendously helpful to help the government kind of understand how to use the technology and deploy it, because each city is a little bit different. But yeah, I think last year definitely changed the way a lot of governments viewed the importance of technology. So we're thankful to be part of that shift and that trend. It's been very, very, very quick change, and be curious to see how the next couple of years shake out after the Biden plan rolls out.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you guys work with a lot of local state reps? I'm assuming local government officials.
Yeah, we mostly work with CIOs and kind of start there, and then work our way through different departments and divisions. Work with a lot of their GIS team.
Can you just elaborate on what those acronyms stand for?
Yeah, so CIO, Chief Information Officer. The GIS is Geo Information, Geospatial. And so those are the people that are working within the geospatial platforms. And then also, depending on the city, San Francisco, for example, has a pretty robust and strong data science and data analyst team. Again, people that are very good at kind of telling the story and working with the data so that the executives can make decisions. So from starting engagement, it's at the senior level with the chief information or innovation officer, and then usually we work with innovation teams, and then the day-to-day projects are typically amongst the analysts and data scientists and the geospatial team, and then everything's kind of rolled up into reporting and measuring for the city council and the leaders who share the data and provide reports about it.
How long is the oldest or longest partnership that you guys have with a particular city or group of cities?
Well, Pooh, you've been working with San Leandro, probably the longest.
Yeah, we have multi-year partnerships. We started with mid to small cities, and we still tend to focus a lot on mid to small cities, because if you if you look at the landscape of cities and towns across the US, like pick 1,000 cities ranked by population, you're going to notice that, like that Carl was mentioning, the top 20 cities have sufficient budget, strong data science teams, a CIO, a CDO, those types of titles are in place. But CDO being Chief Data Officer. But when you start looking at the mid to small cities, right, you're looking at populations around 250,000 and less than 250,000. These cities do not have the infrastructure or the resources or the people in place. So we were always focused on those, and we are fortunate to have the larger cities come and work with us now. But some of the smaller cities like San Leandro have been with us forever, and these tend to be multi-year deals. And that is one of the nice things about the government space, going back to the question you had asked Carl earlier about what's the difference between government and private sector. So in the private sector, you tend to have these quick deals where you're looking at maybe a 1-year timeline or maybe a month to month. But the nice thing about government deals is though the lead up to it can be quite long, and you might be many months into a trial and lots of validation. But once you're in for the long term. And so we are fortunate to have these multi-year deals with mid to small cities.
Great. Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm curious when these cities and just governments in general are evaluating what your offer really is. Clearly you're offering them very deep insights, but these insights are meant to be actionable. What's the problem that they're looking to solve with this data? Is it to make their cities more efficient, climate friendly, increase diversity inclusion? What are they looking to do with the data to make their cities better?
So there's a variety of use cases, and we can probably just touch upon all of them and then go deeper into some of them. So let me just give you like a quick list here. So when we provide data insights to cities about primarily people, presence, density, and mobility patterns, the first thing that comes to mind is economic development. So they instantly gravitate towards trying to figure out, are people returning to the downtown areas and to our commercial districts and our local businesses, especially now as we are reopening and coming out of the situation we were in. So economic development and measuring economic activity is a key use case. Then there's mobility and planning. So if you look at the daytime population of most cities, the daytime population tends to be 2.5x to 3x of the actual census resident population. So cities balloon in size during the daytime hours and then go back to the census population in the evening and night hours, typically. So understanding those trends and then trying to figure out what does that mean from a public transit perspective. How do we design our transportation and our transit strategies to handle that kind of volume? The third thing is urban design. So everyone talks about the ideal 15-minute city. So you have these mini cities or towns within cities, and how do you design those so that you can truly get to everything you want within 15 minutes? Parks and recreation, the agency or the department that's often ignored at cities. And I think parks and open spaces were probably the savior when it came to COVID. And so that put the spotlight back on Parks and Rec. And so trying to understand how many people are visiting local parks and trails, how are they engaging with the city-run programs and events, which are usually hosted by Parks and Rec, has become a very important thing for us. Two more come to mind. One is disaster resilience. So when you're looking at natural disasters like hurricanes or earthquakes, or you're looking at wildfires, what were the movement patterns of people before, during, and after such incidents? And then what is the short-range impact as well as the long-range impact? Because people tend to relocate when these things happen. And did they relocate permanently, or did they come back after 6 months to 1 year? And of course, the last is, but not the least, is customer service. Citizens tend to call into cities a lot. Cities have hotlines, cities have mobile apps, and all of us are constantly giving feedback to cities. Like there's a problem with our sidewalks, there's a problem with potholes, graffiti, construction noise, you name it. And so how does a city prioritize these calls? Is it based on when the call arrived? Is it based on some internal logic? They sat down as a team and figured it out? Or is it based on actual measured impact? How many people were impacted by that construction project in downtown that is rerouting everyone through these inner streets? How many people were impacted by potholes in the city? To try and measure that and quantify that helps cities to then prioritize how they tackle these problems. So those are the typical use cases for our data sets.
That was great. I think that was a very well said, nicely concise overview of all the different use cases. So I appreciate that. With kind of the last couple of questions we had here, I think one of the things that I noticed is when we were first writing the article is that your company is, appears to be very young. It looks like it was founded quite recently, but it seems like you've accomplished a lot in a short period of time. What would you say is some of your biggest milestones so far?
I think, we've done a really good job kind of navigating not only the pandemic, but just, working remote and kind of unifying as a team. And, we're not in the work setting together. So working as a global remote team, we've continued to grow and grow. So in terms of just overall, successes, that we've accomplished, our revenues are in the 7 figures, which is definitely a huge milestone for any startup. I think there's a stat out there that maybe 99% of startups in the first year never really make that an important milestone. So, in the midst of everything going on, we were able to kind of hunker down and have a good performance year. Overall, in terms of customers, last year we onboarded 21 new customers. A lot in the US really was our fast growth market, working with many cities in the Bay Area, San Francisco, for example, San Jose, San Leandro. We're also onboarding some other big kind of county and city level projects along the DC area as well. That's kind of taking a little bit longer, but we're proud of that accomplishment. We're also recognized by the GovTech community as one of the top GovTech companies. We're on the top 100 list. And again, that's just for us providing tech solutions to the government space. Also, we were trying to think kind of creative and how can we, help others with, the work that we do. So we launched a initiative called the University Council that allows public, private, and academic organizations to collaborate. So Apu and I have been kind of kicking that off. Again, kind of bringing together our partners in India and Singapore, even down in Latin America and even in Europe. So that's been fruitful even out of the kind of first phase of it. It was an invite only, and now that it's actually kind of gotten a little bit more awareness, we've had people reach out to us directly that want to participate and want to join. So that's been really kind of nice to see that the awareness is out there, and people are coming to us to get more involved. A couple more things. We launched Data for Humanity platform last year around the COVID tracking. And that was our way to, again, try and help different countries, different, people that are trying to understand, the people movement data within their cities to help support the COVID tracking. We did that all for pro bono. Felt like that was obviously the right thing to do to support governments, but even a lot of the academia world, providing data and kind of collaborate with them, which has definitely been very fruitful. And actually last week, we were just notified that we're a recipient of the Smart 50 award. That's kind of a national award that was sponsored by Smart Cities Connect Foundation. So we just found out about that next week, and we'll be going to DC to receive an award for that later this year. So yeah, we've had a good 6 months, but yeah, we're definitely looking forward to the future and growing our team and growing obviously all the cities that we work and support.
Wow, it sounds like you guys definitely have a lot of recognition, which is amazing. And it really seems like there's a very strong like GovTech community like surrounding these startups, you know, to bring awareness, like recognize them. I think that there's, like you said, I mean, I think there's a huge demand, there's a huge need for governments to integrate more with data for the people that kind of like live in the cities that they run. You know, like it's such an obvious like connection, but it's kind of like almost heartwarming to see that you guys are being recognized and are, you know, really like trying to bring positivity and good to the world, especially in a time when, you know, there's a lot of, I guess, demand for that kind of empathy. I mean, with all these like recognitions and accolades, you know, like what is like the next step, you know, for CityData to just keep launching these initiatives, like keep the partnerships up, or you know, like what is the goal, you know, for you guys in the long run?
So we tend to be very focused on execution. And the reason we can win the clients, the reason Carl is able to talk to all of these government customers and present them and delight them is because we are very disciplined, both on the business side as well as on the product side. And we've got to operationalize and automate a lot of things if we want to continue to succeed the way we've begun. So you want to keep that success rate going. So internally, we are very focused on execution. I know a lot of startups, especially early stage startups, are 100% focused on fundraising, because that is how you are measured. It's how much did you raise, right? How big was your round? We tend to be the exact opposite. So we are happy with small rounds. We are happy to take just what is needed, which also means that the employees tend to hold on to more meaningful positions, equity positions in the company. And we know that if we can execute and we stay focused, that we will win. It may be a longer path to success, but in the government space, it's always going to be a longer path. And so we're totally fine with that. From an overall, where are we going standpoint, look, we are already computing daily mobility insights and geospatial insights for over 1,500 cities worldwide. And we've figured out the privacy landscape. We're totally comfortable with that. What we've realized is that if we can keep executing, and we're at 1,500 cities today, if we can get to 5,000 cities worldwide, and those would be measured in terms of a population of a threshold of 40,000 people. So if you have a city or a town with more than 40,000 people, we want to have those insights automatically computed in our platform every day. If we can get to that point, we could potentially replace or be the census, the official census for these cities. So think of it in terms of what happened last year with 2020. Every country was in the process of attempting to do their census, and almost everyone failed. Across the board, they all failed with their census. And now they are releasing, so they're trying to catch up. And they're making a sincere effort to catch up. But the census survey, which is a door-to-door survey in most countries, or it's the panel that represents maybe 25% of the population, and they extrapolate from there. Well, we don't need to do that anymore. If we can perfect our techniques here, and we can scale up to all the cities in the world, we really think that eventually we could be the census survey. So that's our long term, and that's where we want to go.
Wow,
Amazing.
I'm gonna be honest. Like, I wasn't expecting that answer, but I think that that's a really good goal. Like, if this, because how often is the census done? Every 5 years?
Depends on the country. So most
Every
countries have
country?
a census every 10 years. They may have a minor census every 5 years. In the US, we are really good about doing a annual, what is it called? The American Community Survey, ACS.
Yeah.
The much smaller survey, but they try to fill the gaps. But you're not going to see this in most countries. Most countries are just stuck on the 10-year cycle.
Wow. And I mean, just like thinking of going from a 10-year cycle to, I mean, let's say like a daily, like live view. I mean, it's like not even, it's orders of magnitude on orders of magnitude different in terms of how you can actually, how government can make decisions about their people, right? Like maybe we could drop the lag between like how governments like pass initiatives and like what the actual people need at a specific point in time. I mean, wow, like that's great.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. One, there are lots of technological challenges to do.
Really, it's not easy.
But the bigger problem is not the technology, believe it or not. We'll build the platforms, we'll write the code, we'll find the data, we'll publish it. The bigger problem is going to be adoption. So to get people in government to think about being able to use this on a daily basis and to make it actionable so that they can use it, because they are still stuck on the 10-year timeline. To get them to shift from 10 years to 24 hours, that's the challenge.
That's the challenge, yeah. I know you guys spoke on education right earlier. Like, I feel like that's the biggest thing when it comes to adopting new technologies is like, how well can you educate someone who has zero understanding of what what a technology is, like when they dive into it, to being comfortable with utilizing it and like making decisions on it. That's the biggest part, really.
Yeah, I think the shift's already begun in terms of the newer workforce is obviously going to be younger and more tech savvy and kind of analytical in the sense of how to use the platform. So that's definitely in our favor. Seeing a lot more of the younger recent college grads and even after kind of perfecting their craft and how to manipulate and understand the data. So I think that in combination with maybe a little bit more funding and understanding will be definitely helpful for us, but also more for the cities so that they can optimally work more efficiently and understand the data and use the data. But it's our job to teach them why it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to wrap this up, I mean, congratulations to both of you. Amazing milestones to date in just such a short period of time. And just hearing you guys lay out the strategy, the philosophy, and the grand vision, already can understand there's going to be much more growth and achievements ahead.